It is also the land of the Petun and the Huron-Wendat peoples, and recognized officially as the land of the Mississauga of the Credit River, as they were here at the point of contact. It is also the land of the one dish, one spoon wampum belt covenant between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe and other nations to share the resources and the caretaking of this land. Toronto is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. It is also the home of the red-tailed hawk, the eastern gray squirrel, the red fox, raccoons, white-tailed deer, bats, many insects, and other species. While it is important to do land acknowledgements, we must recognize that we must do more and ensure that we are not doing checkbox activism. Recognizing whose land we are on is a start, but we cannot stop there. At this time, the word reconciliation is on the mouths of many, including a lot of government officials and often with a hollow ring. Because there can be no reconciliation without conciliation, and there can be no conciliation without reparations. What that looks like is a conversation we need to have, and in consultation with the peoples of this land. Thank you. So I know that there are lots of great people on this call, and we are going to have a really wonderful exchange. But we wanted to, first of all, welcome our speakers, welcome all of you, our participants from across the world. We're here today to hear about an amazing, amazing book. And it's called Muslim American Writers at Home. This is what it looks like. I have my copy. This is an advertising, segment too. So we're happy to have you all. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speakers, and then they're going to tell you about how the book project came together. I'm first of all really happy to have Kitty Costello, one of the editors, with us. And I know she's a kindred spirit because of the history of the publishing house that started with a group of women. So we welcome Kitty. Kitty's in San Francisco. The other book editor is Valerie Bahiri. Valerie she's Dr. Valerie Bahiri, is a Canadian artist, writer, and academic whose life has been devoted to the arts, both their making and study. And Valerie is no stranger to CCMW. She's had a long association with us. In fact, she did the artwork and she edited, she actually drafted a book called Islam, Its Roots and Wings for us. So welcome, Valerie. She happens to be in Riyadh right now. Our the other editor is Hanan, and Hanan Hazimi is a multidisciplinary artist, creative writer, and arts educator living in Toronto. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the other speakers, whom some of you will already know because they're either your neighbors or they're well known in the Canadian zeitgeist. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Mounia Mazih. She's a Canadian author and academic born and raised in Tunisia. She speaks Arabic, French, and English, and holds a PhD in finance from McGill University. Again, Mounia is not new to any of us. She is the role model that we all look for. She's a fighter. She fought for the rights of her family, of her husband, and took on the Canadian government like no other. So welcome, Mounia. And our other speaker, who happens to be related to Mounia, is Baraa Arar. She is a Toronto-based community organizer, writer, and editor. She holds a Bachelor of Humanities from Carleton University and a Master's in History from the University of Toronto. And I just learned that Baraa and I are neighbors in Toronto. And I'm also delighted to introduce you to Hanaa Walzer, born in a Swiss Mi'kmaq Protestant Catholic family in Atlantic Canada, and raised in the south of Switzerland, living on a Mi'kmaq reserve in small and large Canadian cities, and embracing Islam, living in Libya before, during, and after the revolution, and ultimately returning to her countries of origin. You're going to hear from Hanaa about her experience on being Muslim and uh, her in all of her intersections in her identities. So, welcome everyone. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to our three editors. And you can, either one of you can start. I know you know what you're doing. So Kitty, Valerie, and Hanan, over to you.
Hanan just got here.
Welcome, Hanan.
Yeah,
Valerie, do you want to start? Since
okay,
the idea for this book, it was your inspiration.
Okay. So, yeah, the idea came several years ago in 2018. It's, you know, I lived in France for a long time, then in Montreal for over 20 years. And then my husband was actually forced into early retirement. We couldn't find work except Turkey and then in Saudi. And, you know, just the experience of coming from a, you know, very, you know, Catholic family and then becoming Muslim, just what I experienced. And that was why I really fell in love with the article written by a UK woman about how like even like the hijab can be, it's almost like a racial divide, you know? So if you are like a white person, if you are covered, you suddenly, you see, no, people are no longer seeing you like that, you know? So it's actually, and you know, losing privilege is a good thing, but then being, you know, I knew about racism. I've always had, you know, friends from all different places, but then experiencing it and then hearing how others experienced it. And so the point was really to kind of, you know, writing and art are about a shared humanity. And then there's also the idea of like home, which is, you know, and home is about kind of belonging and our multiple identities. So the book just came at that idea. And then I was taking a poetry class and it was with Kitty. It was there as well. And I could just feel her wonderful, you know, she was always had beautiful words for people, which is very open. I just felt comfortable with her from the beginning. I was, of course, not showing my photo. And so I invited, you know, Kitty, would you like to make this book? And so now we can pass that on to Kitty.
Thank you, Valerie. And it's so touching to be welcomed into this community, being the one, well, I don't know if I'm the only non-Muslim on the call, but I'm the only non-Muslim that's been working on the book, and also being from the US. So I don't know, there might be some other folks. But yeah, I've had such an awakening from this process, and a really welcome awakening. It is not comfortable to sit around next to watching other people be harmed. And when you have, you know, somebody hands you something you can do that's in your wheelhouse, it's a great relief. So that's how it felt when Valerie proposed this. Yeah, I went back and looked up the original call that we put out, especially because the three writers you're going to hear from today are all, they all wrote their pieces in response to the call, which is not true of the whole book. Some people had material that matched the theme, and some people wrote fresh. So I'm just going to read a tiny bit from it. Well, Valerie wrote a beautiful thing about our, you know, we have us all having multiple identities at the beginning, but then for the projected anthology, we were looking for submissions of poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, or memoir that address themes of identity and home from North American writers who fully self-identify as Muslim. Themes could include, but are not limited to, topics like how you experience your Muslim American identity, how you or your ancestors made your home in North America, how your Muslim beliefs and practices are integrated into your life here, what connects you with the home your family migrated from, how or when have you felt the most welcomed here, How or when have you felt the most misrepresented or misunderstood here? What would you most like for other people to know about your culture, your beliefs, your journey? So yeah, for me, I've just the perfect combination of curious and ignorant to be, and also just sort of a bridge person to, like what I don't know and what I've learned. Just knowing, yeah, but if I don't know it, probably most of the other non-Muslims don't know it either. So yes, it's funny that my ignorance has been one of the things I could offer to this project. Yeah, just what came to us was, just stunningly diverse. I don't know if it feels the same to the Muslim people who read the book, if it feels as surprising. But yeah, the diversity, of course, there's people from the US and from Canada, people who are North American born or more recent immigrants, people who are Muslim or converts, reverts, and then the genres were, everything. We received everything. Yeah, so I was just amazed to people whose ancestors came on the Mayflower, and Native Americans, when you're going to hear from today. Yeah, and African Americans who descended from slaves who their ancestors were Muslims when they were gathered up and brought here against their will. It's like, I never knew that. How did I not know that? Yeah, we have one Puerto Rican Muslim, sixth generation Louisiana African American. There's one person who was born in Uganda, and then Idi Amin threw all the Asians out of Uganda, and they migrated to the US as a baby. It's so amazingly diverse. I'm just so excited for people to, other people who don't know anything like I didn't know much, to have that sort of awakening. I grew up Catholic. I practice Buddhist practices. And there's a concept, I wrote about it in my part of the intro, but of the gift of fearlessness, is the generosity being, a hallmark of, I think, every religion on earth. But one of the most important gifts that the Buddha spoke of was the gift of fearlessness for people who have been put through, whether it's natural disasters or, human oppression from other people, any of that, to give the gift of fearlessness, and just felt like I was bringing that. And then it felt so much like, no, I'm receiving that from these people who are going through this time that's, where they're being targeted. And I feel braver. I feel like I can speak up more because I've read these works. So I feel like I've received that gift of fearlessness. Like, if these folks can stand up, what else can I stand up about? So thank you all. And Hanan, we invited in here. It's just, we had the two of us, and we thought, no, we need some younger energy. We need a third opinion. And Hanan's a happening artist here. So join in, Hanan. Tell us about your...
Thanks, Valerie, and thanks to CCMW for putting this on. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So I'm going to, I guess Kitty and Valerie really covered everything pretty much. I'm going to say that I was hoping that this book, and I've written it in my introduction, that it would kind of provide a snapshot of the vast array of Muslim American experiences and stories. And something for me that I wanted to stress is that usually works by Muslim writers, kind of the mainstream discourse is to have our narratives be about oppression or about terrorism. I mean, works written by non-Muslims. but also in works written by Muslims, they also seem to center on those stories of facing oppression and war or facing Islamophobia, because it seems that the world thinks those are the only stories we can tell or that we have to tell. And I really loved that. So I'm just going to read from my intro. So in this book, you will find that not all the works in this anthology explicitly depict experiences of Islamophobia or oppression. So while some of the writers have directly addressed issues like Islamophobia or racism in their pieces, other writers have penned stories and poems sharing lived experiences that go beyond the scope of Islamophobia-induced trauma and oppression. Sometimes we just want to write about chocolate cake or jasmine flowers. We are multifaceted human beings with intersectional identities and a plethora of varied experiences, including struggles with Islamophobia, racism, and cultural assimilation, but those struggles don't encompass our existence entirely. So with this in mind, I would like to share with you my poem, and it's called Introduction to Poetry by a Muslim poet, and it's based on Billy Collins's poem Introduction to Poetry. And my hopes is that folks would have taken the spirit of the message in my poem while reading this book, and approaching the work with an open mind, and an open heart, and realizing that the stories may be very different than their own, either as a non-Muslim or even as a Muslim, because we're not a monolith and we all have different experiences, different lived experiences. We come from different cultures, different intersectionalities. So our experience of being Muslim or of being Muslim American or Muslim Canadian is not the same. We're all experience that differently. So I'm going to read my poem, Introduction to Poetry by a Muslim Poet, and it's on page 9 of the book. The book right here. I ask them to take my poem and slowly unfurl its intricate layers like a blooming tea flower, or press an ear against its pulsing heart. I say, deep dive into my poem and explore its shadowy crevices, or shine a light on the poem's surface and watch as its iridescent metaphors dance. I want them to take an evening stroll with my poem and invite it to Sunday brunch with their mothers. I want them to cradle my poem in their arms and sing it to sleep under the moonlight. I want them to bring my poem to their lips and savor its diverse, delectable flavors. But all they want to do is tie my poem to a chair with rope and smother it in exotic spices, curry, saffron, turmeric. They want to slather it in hummus, make it taste more Muslim. They begin stabbing my poem with pitchforks to find out where it's really from. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Nuzhat, were you going to introduce the readers in a particular order, or should we do that? Oh. Had we decided on that order, Valerie?
I'm looking at the, oh, I guess would someone like to start? And first I want to say thank you. I was really hoping that Hanan would read her poem. It's really very powerful. Thank you for that. And
Thank you.
yeah, who would like to
Okay,
start?
yeah, Valerie, I was going to suggest let's do
Okay,
it in
go ahead.
alphabetical order.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with Baraa, and then we can have Hana, and then Monia, and then we'll have a chance to exchange lots of greetings and ask you questions. How about that? Okay, Baraa, over to you.
Thank you. I feel like I'm in school again and I'm always at the top of the alphabetical list. And I love those teachers who would be they'd be like, we're gonna do something different. And then they'd do reverse alphabetical order. And that was often great, unless it was a good thing, unless they were giving out prizes or something. And then I would want to be at the beginning. So thank you everyone for being here today. I know it's hard to make time, as has been said, that it's hard to make time even though we're all at home, and there is definitely Zoom fatigue. And and of course, thank you to the editors and CCMW for inviting me. This is the first reading for this book that I attend, so I feel very happy and excited. And then also, I feel so many layers to this because this is a Mother's Day reading. My mom is here. She'll be reading because she's also in the book. This piece is actually about mothers. I mention many things about Ramadan and Eid. We're in Ramadan, and Eid is very soon in the next few days. So I feel that there are rereading this piece from now, I must have been 3 years ago or so, just felt so somehow still so real to me. So yeah, if you'd like to follow along, it's on page 115. I hope that you like it, and I'll also say something a little bit more at the end, but for now, I'll keep it a surprise. Of molten chocolate cakes and mothers. Also, this can be weird because I'm talking about mothers and my mother is on the call. So I'll be revealing some things about her and our family, which usually wouldn't be the case, but you know, maybe she can pretend that I'm, we're not related for a second. Molten chocolate cakes are my mother's absolute favorite dessert. I mean, maybe they're not her absolute favorite, but if she had a list of the top 10, they'd be up there. I remember vividly one night when she came home from one literary event or another and gushed over these little warm chocolate pots with a creamy center that she had devoured. The following Mother's Day, I woke up earlier than the rest of the family and made them for us. I served them with whipped cream and fresh fruit. They turned out delicious. Until this day, my first try at that dessert was my very best. I made them a few times since, but never to the same caliber of success. Being in the kitchen was part of my childhood. I grew up surrounded by two very strong women, my mother and her mother. And there was always one place where those women coexisted, the kitchen. I grew up learning how to cook by watching my grandma move effortlessly from the counter to the sink to the stovetop. Upon my return from school, I would throw my bag on the couch, run into the kitchen, and see what I could do to help my grandmother. Most of the time, I was assigned the most mundane tasks, the tasks she didn't want to do. So I would peel the sticky skin off the grilled peppers, and I would chop the onions behind a screen of tears. My grandmother cooked every day. Sometimes it felt like she spent the whole day cooking. For Eid, the festive preparations stretched over a few days. She would roll out the dough for fresh nouasser, a semolina-based Tunisian noodle. She rolled and dyed marzipan to make ka'abir, colorful almond sweets coated in granulated sugar. All our plastic containers were full of some sort of delicacy. As a child, I didn't grasp the effort exuded in this culinary enterprise. It took me a while to learn that good, proper Tunisian food, comfort food that is, took hours of slow, relentless simmering. Tunisian dishes, like most home cooking, are the product of long, patient hours. They are products of women who spend much of their day at home, toiling for their families, or for those who can afford it, a hired cook to replace them. As a teenager, I stopped giving my grandmother a hand in the kitchen, and I hoarded my free labor because I was too busy having friends or eating Dairy Queen at the beach or hanging out at the periphery of my high school's yard. I was too busy and too cool to help my own grandmother. And such is teenagehood. But every once in a while, I would throw myself back into the kitchen for isolated occasions. With an upbringing in the kitchen, I did not shy away from pancake breakfasts, potluck dinners, or school bake sales. The kitchen is a mass producer of comfort and goodness. Birthday cake, anniversary dinners, Mother's Day brunch. But kitchens also incubate disaster, burns, scratches, salting something instead of adding sugar to it, and disasters are natural outcomes of kitchen experimentation. And experiments breed arguments. Whenever I helped my grandmother peel the grilled peppers or chop the onions, she would inevitably have something to say about my technique. There would always be a snide word about how young girls these days did a subpar job in the kitchen. One time during high school, my grandmother softly coerced me. I would revise this and say, strongly coerced me into the kitchen to teach me how to debone a chicken. I was 17 and interested in boys and skinny jeans and getting into university. I was interested in a lot of things, but deboning a chicken was not one of them. In typical teenage fashion, I initially refused, but that was not an option for her. My grandmother literally dragged me into the kitchen, put a knife in my hand, and made me find the breast tendon and make an incision. I remember crying as I looked for the bone with my pointer finger, thinking to myself, none of my white friends have to engage in such a backward tradition. But like with everything, it was over shortly after it started, and I went back to thinking about boys and skinny jeans and getting into university. Familial relationships thrive in the kitchen, despite failed experiments. It is no coincidence an IKEA ad titled Nonna is built on the premise of an unimpressionable Italian matriarch whose silent stamp of approval causes her family members to walk on eggshells. The ad captures the impossibly awkward power dynamics that underlie how we interact with our families. Those petty and mundane arguments shape our relationships. Kitchens create delicious meals and wreak havoc. Kitchens are where we keep the knives. Kitchens are where the pans are scalding and the tempers are hot. And yet, after a long day, we find ourselves back in the kitchen, cooking for our families or making ourselves a cup of tea. No matter how much I want to hide in my room from my weird, no matter how much I wanted to hide away in my room from my weird immigrant family and deboning chickens and home cooking, they stubbornly crept back into my life. Now that I am a little less angry with the world, I love hosting a large iftar every Ramadan. I invite my friends of friends, siblings of friends, and we break our fasts together. I love hosting people in my home during Ramadan, while the rest of the neighborhood gets ready to rest their eyes at 9:45 p.m. My Muslim friends and some non-Muslims who tag along flock to my place to gorge on stuffed dates, lentil soup, lamb stew, and grilled peaches. In a world plagued with inequality and confusion, the simple act of eating together in the late hours among second-generation Muslims is therapeutic. I do not have to cook. I live at home with plenty of established and inspiring cooks ready to whip something up, but I like to cook. I cook to remember. I cook to forget, to make something, to feel useful, and I write for the same reasons. Right now, I am writing because I failed to make good molten chocolate cakes again. I forgot to add flour and there was not enough sugar to thicken the mixture, so my family had to endure subpar chocolate cakes. In the grand scheme of things, chocolate is chocolate, but I still felt bad about it. As I made the dessert, my mom came to help. She asked if I should use a whisk instead of a spatula, and I retorted back self-assuredly, "You don't trust me." I regressed back into a 17-year-old girl unwilling to debone a chicken. My sharp words sent us into a bickering match. I tell her it's about trusting my skills. She tells me it's not about trust. We are both spitting images of our own mothers. We go back and forth like clockwork. We play a game of tug of war, two equally strong, independent female contestants. Sometimes she slips and I win, but only momentarily, until I slip and she takes her triumphal maternal place. My relationship with my mother, my grandmother, and food is complicated. Being in the kitchen taught me that day-to-day life is not always easy, at least not for my intergenerational immigrant family. On TV, white families always looked so happy. They had movie nights and Taco Tuesdays, and white moms never seemed to be upset with their kids. At our house, we always seemed to bicker about nothing and everything all the time. Our issues were compounded and amplified by cultural miscommunications, intergenerational divides, and always in the background was the inherently fragmented diaspora experience. We argued, but food made it better. Food always makes it better. Sometimes I resented my family for making so much of our life about food. In high school, I heard a rumor. I think this is true, just side note, author's note. I heard a rumor that the stepmother of one of the senior girls locks the pantry so the girls don't snack. I heard she forces them to have salad at least one meal a day. Part of me didn't like this, but another part of me felt envious. A side note, I now see that as a very problematic thing, far more problematic than I thought at the time. If my family controlled my eating that way, maybe I would not be so chubby in the middle. A part of me was angry. All sorts of delicious food was readily accessible for consumption at our house. We were always thinking about what to cook next, what we need to defrost to prepare the next meal. There was always something to be said about food. Whenever my friends came over, I had to explain to them what we were eating for dinner. It's like Tunisian pasta, I would say. I tried to provide them a reference point to make the foreign relatable to their upper middle class white experiences. Their parents would pick them up from a night of eating and studying and thank my mom for feeding my kid. My mom never understood the gratitude. These were the rules of hospitality in our culture. If someone comes over, naturally, you feed them. My grandmother feels important in the kitchen. Her family circumstances dictated she grew up with limited formal education and a young marriage, but she always prides herself as a wonderful cook. But of course, my grandmother had to learn somewhere. She was someone's daughter. She served her time dutifully chopping onions and peeling grilled peppers. But by the time she was 19, she was ready to wed and knew the quintessential dishes. I knew nothing when I got married, her narrative arc begins, but now she was our matriarchal cook. Even when she goes home to Tunisia, her family members beg her to make their favorites. The comfort food classics, couscous with lamb, shakshuka, now people know what that is, but at the time, poached eggs in spiced sauce, merguez, which is a sausage, brique, Tunisian spring rolls. The childhood dishes they crave but can't make quite right themselves. My mother, Tunisian born, came to Canada in her early 20s for her graduate studies. She brought with her the working knowledge of Tunisian dishes, but inevitably, like many immigrants, she adopted a hybrid kitchen experience. So my mom grills salmon and bakes banana bread and can cook couscous the white way, to my grandmother's horror. Food is a vehicle for cultural transfer of knowledge. In my mother's life, the kinds of foods she makes are markers of integration and change. My Tunisian grandmother's own culinary evolution continued, no matter how much she contests it. She learned how to make tandoori and butter chicken from Indian friends, recipes with their own unique colonial histories. But my grandmother doesn't know that. Good food is good food. Our family's fixation used to anger me. Why did we eat so differently from others? Why was our food so fatty, so much? Among many other aspects, my family's approach to food marked us as different from the dominant or mainstream culture. As a teenager, this made me resentful. As a child of immigrants, as the children of immigrants, much of our early lives revolve around experimentation, not only in the kitchen, but in a system rigged against people who look like us, people who pray like us, people who eat like us. It took me a long time to understand why my grandmother spent so much of her day cooking. In the moments of inevitable confusion and uncertainty, in the moments of dépaysement or disorientation, cooking meals from back home is a great solace. I now understand this almost compulsive need to cook. We cook to remember, we cook to forget.
Did you check on Reza for me?
To make something, we cook to feel useful, and we write for the same reasons. Thank you. The one thing I was gonna say is that when I was practicing this just earlier in reading, my husband was joking and he says, "Wow, these scenes in the kitchen are so familiar. I wonder why." And so I am happy to say they have continued in my marriage, and we're still always, especially around Ramadan, sort of bickering about how to do things certain ways. So yes, thank you for the opportunity. I won't take any more time. Thank you, everyone.
I think we're going to hear from Hanaa right now. Hanaa?
Thank you. Yes. As you mentioned, I wrote my memoir specifically for this anthology. Valerie and I go back nearly a quarter of a century. And during this time, the concept of home was something that I struggled with on a personal level. So I was very happy with the opportunity to flesh out exactly how I felt about it. And I'm very happy to be here today to be able to read for CCMW. Thank you so much. So as a background, I was born here on Mi'kma'ki by my Mi'kmaq mom and Swiss dad. And I was just a toddler when we moved to Ticino, Switzerland, where I spent my childhood and teenage years. We kept in touch with our Mi'kmaq culture through books, news, phone calls, stories, and the Micmac and Maliseet news, which arrived every month, and regular visits to the Eskazoni Reserve, where my mom's family relocated during centralization in Nova Scotia in the late 1940s. I returned to Canada in my late teens to rediscover my roots and find myself, as all late teenagers try to do, only to discover that it wasn't as cool being an Indian here as it had been all my life, growing up far removed from the daily racism that permeates Native existence in the Americas and elsewhere. It was here that I learned about Islam and through fellow students who practiced it. When I converted and started wearing the hijab, another layer of discrimination presented itself to me, no pun intended. Here is also where I met my husband. As soon as we finished our doctoral studies, we decided to give his native Libya a try. I thought I'd love it. I met some of his family, they're great. I spoke some Arabic and I'm a practicing Muslim. Easy peasy, right? Well, it wasn't a bed of roses, let me tell you that, unless you count the thorns. And then the revolution broke out. Yay! And I found myself sheltering with relatives in Switzerland for the first time since being Muslim, living and raising my 4 sons in the same place I had grown up as a Roman Catholic. I had to yet again reassert my right to exist and move about. And thanks to the support of my family and friends, my knowledge of the culture, language, and the area, it went surprisingly well for me and my kids, but not so great for my husband. After a year and a half, elections went off without a hitch in Libya, so we decided to return with high hopes, which were shattered, as you probably know. So we moved to Tunisia and then Turkey. We could definitely find ourselves living in Turkey long term, but it wasn't meant to be. And so we returned to Mi'kma'ki, and we've been here since. No complaints, but I do find myself missing my husband's family, the Adan 5 times a day. My kids, I'm kind of sad that my kids have to constantly justify their religion, and we have to go way out of our way to include our religious celebrations in the school schedule. Ramadan and Eid are especially challenging without the dozens of cousins, aunts, and uncles celebrating with us, as many of you have experienced, especially lately with COVID restrictions. We makeshift small tribes through the mosques, neighbors, and schools, but we always come out wishing it didn't have to be so contrived. So I definitely had to switch perspectives a lot throughout my life, and especially in the last 10 years. So this memoir or essay is the result of my endless search. This is a redacted version of it. It's quite long, so I had to condense it quite a bit. It's titled Home Again and is found on page 62 of the anthology. Where is home? This is a question I've asked myself and others wherever I've lived. I have found some aspect of home wherever I've gone, but something always eludes me. However, I think I may have stumbled upon an answer that satisfies me. Ultimately, as a Muslim, true home can only be found in Jannah, paradise. Every other place, every other feeling is only a reminiscence, a reminder of what we should be really striving for. Nevertheless, respite is promised after each hardship and safety is yearned for in any unfamiliar setting. But in reality, the truest home is as elusive as lasting happiness. It's a fleeting feeling, a constantly escaping sense of security and calm, which is likely to be snatched away at any given moment. The memory of the feeling persists, however, and allows for renewed hope to find it again. It motivates our constant search and grants us a paragon when we think we may have finally found it. I was raised in Ticino, the Italian part of Switzerland, which makes up about 12% of the Swiss population and was my grandfather's home canton, as it was his own grandfather's. In Switzerland, language defines you to a large extent. My father's Zürcher accent and the fact that we spoke English at home clearly positioned us outside the norm. But English was a cool language, and although it set us apart, it did so in a positive way. Growing up, I became acutely aware of what it meant to speak the right languages and the wrong ones. I became adept at switching codes whenever needed. This gave me privileged views that most people never get to witness. I realized that I needed to give myself the right to occupy any space I felt comfortable and confident occupying, and this confidence exuded an authority that very few dared challenge. Because of my linguistic abilities, I was able to counter oppositions and slowly became more secure in juggling plural identities, despite incredulous and maligning looks. I refused to take my cues from others and relied solely on my own belief in my absolute right to exist in whichever space I put myself. At 18, I left Switzerland. I longed for a place where people couldn't be misplaced, where my roots were undeniably deep and nobody could declare sole ownership of what it meant to be a citizen. Ironically, I sought refuge in my native Canada, where this injustice had been perpetrated onto my Mi'kmaq ancestors for centuries, despite their old roots. The contrast was palpable. I was constantly slipping, there for not being old enough, here for being too old. We didn't have high schools on the Mi'kmaq reserves back then. You had to wake up at the break of dawn to be bussed into town to attend the nearest public school. I observed the Unno native kids huddling together in the staircase on the farthest wing of the enormous building, an area of the school the rest of the kids steered clear of as though it were a leper colony. I then went to a university with a large international student population, many of them Muslim. I still spent weekends, breaks, and summers on the Eskazone Reserve, but the rest of the year I stayed on campus at the university. I didn't grow up struggling between being an Unlo native and Adulasio, a white person. I was both. There was no tension between them inside of me, and this was available even if I had no affiliation. traveling to Toronto with the Southeast Asian Club, I was treated to the most beautiful sight I had ever seen, the Muslim prayer. It was majestic. I decided there and then that I'd be fasting in Ramadan. I continued to quiz all my Muslim friends about prayer, about their belief in God, about the place that Jesus alayhi salam played in their faith, and anything else that came to mind. I spent the next 2 years reevaluating everything, including my studies, and decided that my priorities needed reshuffling. Islam became my new home. To a large extent, it still is. Although now I realize that my way of living Islam is different from everyone else's. It took me years to figure this out, a lot of trial and error, some disappointments, and more wake-up calls than I care to remember, but it's all been fruitful. I now realize that as much as similarities can unite us, differences can keep us in tune with our own unique rhythms and truths, circumstances and histories, and they need to be respected. Far from tearing us apart, they show us how we are meant to learn from each other, to grow and appreciate each other, rather than judge and exclude. Differences and similarities are mutually beneficial. We can't live without either, and the sooner we realize it, the better off we'll be. So this is a very small portion of the essay, and I chose to omit the conclusion so as not to spoil it for those of you who haven't read it yet. Thank you again to everybody for coming today and for the opportunity to write the essay as well as to present it today. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. So inspiring. Monia, can you join us now? I know that you're going to be playing the role of mother, maybe?
Not sure.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Sister Nuzhat, for organizing this event, and CCMW, everyone. And also I would like to thank Kitty, Valerie, Hanan, and everyone who contributed, also my both fellow contributors as well, Hannah, and of course Baraa, contributor, and my daughter in this regard. Yes. I am going to read from the piece I wrote for Muslim American writers at home. And I remember very well how Valerie contacted me. And actually, I think she contacted also my daughter at the same time. And she said, would you be interested? And I found the idea very much appealing. And I wrote this story when I was actually in Vancouver at a writer's residence. And I was writing my novel, but I found time to write this, this piece. And I read it before it got published. I read a shorter version of it to other fellow writers at the Banff residence, and I got a lot of comments about it. So thank you so much, Valerie, for bringing me into your journey, and thank you everyone else who really made this project a book. Thank you. So my piece is in page 146, and it is called A Homeless, Oppressed Bastard. Where is home? I have been asking myself this question since I first set foot in Montreal about 28 years ago and walked into this huge city, a giant compared to my little native town of Tunis, a giant with its straight and long arteries filled with trucks, cars, and snowplows. Nothing in common with Tunisia's tortuous street, obscure alleys surrounding the old houses like a snake surrounding a prey. 1 year after I first arrived in Canada, I went back to visit my parents in Tunisia. It was during the summer, and as usual, I dreaded the heat. Sitting in the sweltering air of my darkened room and longing for some fresh air, I moved my body closer to the wall. But the closer I got to this, to it, the closer I got to sticking my skin against the wall, the warmer it got and the vainer my attempt. I was bored that summer. So some of my friends were getting married and others were going abroad for studies. And then something strange happened. One hot night, while I was trying so hard to find some sleep, I felt some movement near my bed. I opened my eyes and trying to figure out what was going on. Was it my brain playing tricks on me, or was there a ghost in my room? I saw a shadow moving furtively in the darkness. First, I thought it was my father. Sometimes he would wake up at night and cover me with a blanket when the night got cooler. But it was another hot night, and that couldn't be the case. But the shadow was still there near the entrance of my room. I could see it bending its back and its head as if it was fixing something on the floor. Once again, I convinced myself it was my father. He must have found one of those summer crickets and was trying to catch it without making a lot of noise. I promised myself that the next morning I would reproach him for his weird idea to catch insects in the middle of the night. But it was not my father. The shadow kept advancing, a crouched silhouette moving toward my bed. In an instant of panic, I realized that it was a stranger, perhaps a thief or a serial killer. I started screaming. The shadow stopped and quickly ran away, disappearing from my sight back into the darkness of the night. The experience left me stuck with confusion. My parent, sleeping in the room next to me, hurried to my side, thinking that I had lost my mind. But then they saw me trembling with fear. The stranger left from where he had entered, the door in our living room that opens into the garden. He had broken in from there. We found the door forced open. We even noticed the footprint marks the stranger had left on our white fence during the escape. The next morning, my father filed a police report. We never found him and never knew why he had entered our home. I was so frightened. I couldn't sleep in my room anymore. I felt that my privacy was violated, shattered, and gone forever. An intruder, a stranger, very likely a man, had been in my room, few inches away from my bed, from me. After that night, I started sleeping in the same bed with my mom. My father put a mattress near the living room door where the thief had broken in. My father felt he needed to guard the house. For a few weeks, we lived in terror. Our home dynamics changed, as did the rest of my stay in Tunis. When I was about to leave, my mother hugged me and said, "I am so glad you are leaving this place. At least now, you won't be scared." What an irony. I was about to leave my room, my home, my parents, my friends, my family, and I was happy, or rather relieved. Even my mom was happy to see me leave our home. This beloved place was now equivalent to fear. I was happy because on the other side of the ocean, where people usually looked at me with curious eyes, where I longed for the smell of my mother's cooking, here we go, it would be safer or at least less scary than in my own room in my native hometown. Sometimes your home becomes a place you fear, and elsewhere becomes a place you look for safety, as if the world had gone crazy, as if the earth had abruptly swayed from its normal axis, as if your mind were racing in the opposite direction. After that summer, I stopped visiting my hometown. It was not because of that incident. I almost forgot about it. But with my demanding graduate studies, life took me in different direction, and I kept postponing my trips to Tunisia. Meanwhile, my parents came to live in Canada, and I considered my visit to Tunis as a luxurious, almost unnecessary treat. Until 10 years later, when my husband, my 2 children, and I went for a long vacation to Tunis. It was September 2002. My old house became the house where my Canadian-born children played in the same garden where I played as a child, and sat at night on the same veranda where I used to lay down over a kilim, gazing at the stars, trying to catch the shooting ones. Then when my husband decided to go back home to Ottawa for his job, my childhood home brought me some comfort, like a soft lullaby, swaying me between sad and nice memories. But not for long. In a few days, my life crumbled before my very eyes when I learned that my husband had been arrested by the American authorities and thrown into prison. He became a casualty of the so-called war on terror. My world collapsed. My old home could not help me stay calm, could not give me any answer to the Kafkaesque journey that was unfolding in front of me. I was confused, scared, enraged, and terrorized. I felt like a hostage of the same house, its walls, its small windows, and fuzzy garden. I was no longer living in the time zone of Tunis, but rather was constantly waiting for the North American continent to wake up. My only quest was to speak to Canadian officials and try to learn more about the whereabouts of my husband. None of my relatives and friends knew what had happened. I kept it as a secret, as if I was ashamed of what happened to him. I was alone with my children. My home could not protect me anymore. My memories were kidnapped by this new harsh reality. I needed a home, so I flew back to Ottawa. Snowstorms, winds, blizzard, Ottawa Rivers, Parkway, Parliament Hill, they became my new friend. My old friend, the one I once knew, were scared by the news. They hid from me. They fell silent. My house became smaller and smaller. Few people wanted to come to my home. I was the wife of the terrorist. My children were the children of the terrorist. My home was the home of the terrorist. My mother came to live with us. She cooked for us, helped with the children, and most of all, loved us. She became our home, the home whose calming bosom we put our heads on to find peace and serenity. So I'm not finishing it. If you would like to read the rest, it's still a long piece. So once again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share some of my writing, and I'm very, very happy and grateful to every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Well, those readings were incredible, and we could have kept listening to you for the rest of the day. I know that we have quite a few people who might want to talk to you. We had originally sort of planned on having a moderated Q&A with you, but maybe it would be nice to give our sisters and their new brothers here to talk to you directly. And we're going to try something different this time. Oftentimes we used to ask people to put their questions in the chat box. I'm going to be radical, and I'm going to say, use the reaction button and choose the raise hand feature. So we make sure that we hear from you, so you get to ask your question. And forgive me if I don't see every hand, because I'm gonna have to scroll back and forth unless there's another way of checking to see whose hand is up. So we welcome questions, comments, compliments. Who wants to go first? Who dare go first? First, anyone?
See, while people are thinking up their questions, I just wanted to take a moment to give a shout out to the other authors who were on the call with us from the book. Just looking down the list here, Akil Varani, who did the beautiful layout of the book. Hi, Akil. Shamima Khan, one of the poets from the book.
Amrita.
Ambata Kazinans. Wrote a really powerful story. I don't want to forget anybody here. Am I missing anyone? And Aliyah Hogman, who wrote such a beautiful endorsement for us for the cover of the book. I think let us know if I forgot anybody, but I think that's it. Thanks.
Well, thank you. That's great. And welcome.
Zainab bint Yunus, I saw her, I don't know if she's still around, but I saw her joining us and she contributed also a piece.
Wonderful. Excellent. So I know that Alia wanted to say something at the very beginning, and she is most welcome to add her greetings, her comments. I know right now she's muted and her video is off too. Alia, if you're still listening, you're welcome to speak and share your thoughts.
Hello, hello. Assalamu alaikum. Ari is off the screen for a minute. I will go and find her. She's downstairs.
Thank you, Murray.
Into the game.
Assalamu alaikum, Murray.
Alaikum assalam to everybody. Nice
Yeah, it'll be nice to have her back. Thank you, Murray. Okay, Shamima has a question. Shamima, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I really love that. Although my father says every day is Mother's Day and we children try to follow that, it is Mother's Day weekend. So it was really extra special to hear Baraa and Munia. And I couldn't help but think, I was very struck by both of them talking about being in their rooms and whether or not, and like sort of this common theme of whether or not their rooms were, like they thought maybe initially their rooms were sanctuaries or that they were escaping from other things by being in their rooms. And that parallel was very striking to me. So I just wanted to mention that. And of course, thank all the readers for their beautiful, beautiful work and the editors and the organizers. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Shamima. I wanted to let you know that Baraa's reading was actually by design because this was a pre-Mother's Day event. We wanted to make sure that we didn't hold this event tomorrow so you could be with your families and enjoy yourselves with your moms, your grandmothers, your daughters, your sisters, and honor them in your own way. So I'm really grateful, and again, by design, I chose a mother and daughter because what you expressed, Baraa, and also Munia, when you were reading about your mother and you know how important a role they play in our lives, and then even Hanaa, your story of you know sort of the heritage and what you you know what you have. What you have as an identity is just remarkable, and part of that is a gift from your mother. So Alia is back. Alia, we were asking if you wanted to say something because I know you wanted to say something at the very beginning. So please go ahead. Alia is still muted. Let me unmute you. There. Oh. Can you unmute yourself, Alia? Or Murray, you had unmuted, so maybe.
On the bottom left.
The very bottom left. Yeah. Iman, can you unmute Alia? Because I'm not a host.
Murray and I are totally inadept in that to do this kind of stuff. So anyway, assalamu alaikum, all of you. No, I'm just so delighted. I was part of the beginning when Valerie was thinking of doing this book. And then she asked me very kindly to read it. And I was so impressed. I think it's a wonderful book. And I think we're certainly very proud to have it. And thank you for those who read today. It was very nice to see all of you. And we're collecting quite a number of books like this now, aren't we, Nuzhat? We've got this one. We've got the Saima Hussain, the Muslim girl. Yeah, so it's wonderful that there are Muslims writing books like this. And some of you I don't know. Hanaa, I don't know. Where do you live, Hanaa?
No.
Hanaa?
She's in Nova Scotia.
I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Oh, okay. So who's from the States?
Only Kitty, I think. So
we still claim Valerie, even though she keeps living in other strange, exotic places.
Yes. Well, you know what, Alia, again, everything is by design. The authors we chose, they were all women, and they're Canadian.
Yes,
so,
I know.
That was one of the reasons. So thank you, Alia. It was lovely to hear from you. And I know you had quite a bit to do with the book too. And great ideas begin somewhere, and Valerie and Alia discussed this one way back when. I'm wondering if anyone else has yes, Arif, you want to unmute?
Akil, you mean?
Oh, sorry, Akil. I'm sorry, my bad. I just said Arif because of the other Virani I know.
That's right. Liberal MP Arif Virani,
yes.
who I was happy to send a message to when he was reelected and said at the time I was in Montreal or unceded Ganyek Gahaga territory, Jajage, the island, and he said, make sure to have a bagel for me because he misses it so much. And I did. I just want to say something very short. I think I don't speak for everyone, but generally I think people are too shy sometimes to say that we very much enjoyed listening to everybody read today. It's so nice to be here with all of you. And if you will indulge me, for 5 seconds, you can close your eyes and imagine being in a room full of 30, 35, 40, 45 people, and imagine the applause or the snaps or that kind of energy that we all were trying to emit through these screens to you. It's not exactly the same, but we can use our imagination to get partway there. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, and yeah, really happy to spend some time with everybody here today.
Thank you, Akil. So you're not going to get off the hook that easily. Sure, we're planning to hold a poetry reading and also have art displayed by different artists. So your art in the book is phenomenal. Very impressive. And of course, your poetry as well, mashallah. So we will call on you. We honor all talent, and you can be an honorary member of CCMW as
we call you an honorary woman.
Yeah, for the day. Thank you very much. And Valerie, I think you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you to CCMW and also the reading. Listening to all of these readings, what came to mind is, yes, life is a hero's journey, right? We could feel like the bumps and just the complexity of home and identity. And then I remembered, I also wanted to say, I remember when Hanaa, in your essay, you were saying that home, it's not about where, it's about when, right? When things sort of connect, that's when you're home. It's not a place. It's an inner place more. So I like that idea of not being where, but when, Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Right. So one of the things that we actually discussed in preparation for this reading was the whole concept of home, especially during COVID. We're home all the time, most of us. So, what does that mean these days for all of you? Does anyone want to comment on what it's like to be home all day long?
It seems that Michelle knows what home is. We have a
Oh,
similar.
you've got your cat. Okay. Yes, my cat's just decided to go away for now. Anyone else want to talk about home? I know we heard your readings about home. Hanan, you haven't said too much. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I feel like there's a difference between home and a house or an apartment. So I feel like I live on the top floor of a house. I'm technically in a house, but it doesn't feel like my home because I live in Toronto. So I actually feel like I haven't seen the city. So the city and the people in it and my community and my family and my friends, those are my home. But I'm just in a house right now. So I don't feel like, oh, I'm home, even though I'm in the same four walls. We've been in a stay-at-home order for weeks now. But yeah, it's not the literal walls or roof or furniture that make a home. It's the people, for me anyway. So I have felt like I haven't really been home for a long time.
I think very interesting is the number of us around here who are immigrants, and so therefore home is such a concept which involves so many cultures and identities and everything else. And I'm surprised at how much Valerie travels to different places, and yet I see her very much as a Canadian, and yet she's never here. She's always somewhere else. And I see that Naila Butt is on the Nuzhat. Naila, are you really on here?
Hello, Ji, Assalamualaikum. I'm here. So lovely to see you.
And Naila is everywhere too. Naila is here. Naila is there. So you're here right now, Naila?
Yes, I am. Oh, so wonderful to see you all and hear you.
Yes, nice to see. It's nice to see so many people from across Canada. So we have Tazul from Vancouver, and we have, actually, I don't know where everybody else is, but I can recognize. So this is really, really lovely.
Can I ask Kitty, are you the only American on?
Maybe.
I guess I am, unless somebody else jumps up and says they are.
Welcome to Canada.
Thank you. In the process of working on this, I often just kind of forget my great grandparents migrated through. My great grandmother that I'm named after was born in Toronto. I have a French relative who immigrated to the Hudson Bay area in Canada in the 1600s. So I had to get up there and check out my roots.
Well, welcome. You're a Canadian after all.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Anyone else that wants to say anything? Yes, Monia?
I just wanted to say, to comment, you like this theme of home, and I think the essay of Hannah brought to me this sort of idea, because she said home is only found in the paradise or in Jannah. So this idea of temporary and eternal, I think it's so important. We find our home, our different home, different phases in our life, but there is some sort of a quest that is almost going to be there. I think the idea of temporary is whether, like myself, I was in Montreal, then I moved to Ottawa, then I moved to BC, and then I wish I can go back to Tunisia, but I think those are just temporary, and we try each time to build home with the best of what we can. But there is this idea of home, the eternal home. and that we are somehow always looking for, and then probably it's not going to happen on earth. And I think for the believers, for whoever believe that there is an afterlife, they would think that home will be where everybody will gather and will be happy at the same time, right? Not bickering, not not being annoyed or stressed like we are right now at home, but it would be some sort of an ideal that we long for. So yeah, I really wanted to comment on that, because I like the idea of eternal and temporary. So
True. Remember what they used to say, home is where the heart is. So maybe that's still the case, but then yes, this transition phase that we're in. Valerie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I love that idea of inner peace, and that's we're looking for that. And yes, I believe in this eternal reality, but temporary too. It's still, I could still feel that hero's journey and how we are with these bumps. And I just wanted to acknowledge Monia's heroic side. That's why I reached out to her. She's been a woman that's been like a mentor for me, because someone who, for the love of home, in the sense of family and her husband, she stood up to how many governments, and I just that is just unbelievable. So yeah, Mabruk, congratulations for that, and bless you for that.
Absolutely. So on that note, thank you all again. We just have a few more minutes before we wrap up. I know we could, like I said, go on for the rest of the afternoon, but we want you to enjoy your pre-Mother's Day Saturday. Before we go, I wanted to tell you about an initiative that we launched on our 25th anniversary. It was the Women Who Inspire Awards. So every year we ask for nominations of Canadian Muslim women who have made a difference in other people's lives. If you go to our website, www.ccmw.ca, you will see the nomination form, and we welcome nominations from all of you. The deadline for submissions is May the 28th. And some of the women on this call, in fact, have been recognized, including Monia. Monia has received our Women Who Inspire Award. So, mashallah. So we're hoping that others will make that list and be part of our legacy of amazing Canadian Muslim women who keep on doing extraordinary things out there. So that was one plug for one of our initiatives. The other thing I'd like to remind you of is that this year we partnered with Nissa Homes. They have shelters for Canadian Muslim women in different parts of Canada, and we've been raising funds specifically for the shelters. And that idea came from our chapters, that they wanted to do something to address homelessness during this pandemic, especially for Canadian Muslim women who are experiencing violence right now in the lockdown. So please go to our website and do a donate there. And if you'd like to donate to CCMW generally, there's a donate button on our website for our scholarships, the Dr. Lila Falman scholarships that we award, again, with the Women Who Inspire Awards in the fall. So I'm putting this plug in to raise money. I'm very uncomfortable asking for money, but these are causes that are worth it. So please do contribute. Before we go, I wanted to also thank our team, Iman and Zainab, who helped us technically. They're always there to help us to make sure things run smoothly. And of course, we couldn't have done this incredible event without all of you, without Valerie, Kiri, Hanan, Hanaa, Baraa, and Monia. So mashallah, mashallah, we are very, very lucky and blessed to have you all join us this afternoon. Did I miss anything, anyone? Did I miss thanking anyone, recognizing anyone?
Nuzhat, before we go, can you tell people how to find, how to get to ordering the book from your website?
Sure. Okay. Well, actually, so what I did was I bought some copies for CCMW. I don't have a lot, but I bought copies. And if you're interested, you can email us at info@ccmw and I will.com, and I will make sure that you get a copy. We will let you know the money that will be raised in sending these books to you will go to CCMW. We will be donating the funds because again, a good cause. So let me know, and I have a limited number of copies, but inshallah I'll provide them. And I know that you can order it, Kitty, on Amazon. So that's another place where you could order it. Is there any other source besides Amazon?
Yeah, I just put the publisher link, freedomvoices.org.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks very much. All right. So before we go, I'd like to end with a short surah. Yes. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa allazina amanu wa amilas salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. By time, indeed, humankind is in loss, except for those who have believed and done righteous deeds and advised each other to truth and advised each other to patience. With that, I would like to end. Anyone? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, we'll see you. I promise we'll do a poetry reading, and you'll see us and on another book talk soon. So stay tuned. Visit our website, get on our listserv, and you'll be informed. Thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes. Walaikum salam.